Hello, welcome. I hope you're doing well. I really wanted this video to go up last week. I really wanted it to go up the 4th or 5th, maybe 6th of June, but here we are. I feel like I have a decent explanation though, not that I, owe an explanation. I have said that I'm just gonna put up videos when I can and want to, but I did really want this video to go up last week. The only reason that it didn't is because my wrist got inflamed, which means that it was in a lot of pain and I couldn't really use it much. Then, on top of my wrist being inflamed, the morning I was gonna go to the doctor to see about my wrist, I stumbled down a couple of stairs and hurt my ankle pretty bad. Nothing's broken or anything, but it's been difficult to walk on for a few days, and now it's also just kind of really sore. And then, as if that weren't enough, the very cherry on top, I'm starting to get a cold. It's been a week. So I really did not feel like filming anything. I just felt like sitting around in my pajamas all day, not moving my wrist, not moving my ankle. Editing, I don't know. I don't know when this video is gonna go up because the editing will take as long as it takes. I have only one hand that I can use properly, and so everything is going to be slowed down a little bit, but it's good. My wrist is fine now, not in so much pain. The medication is doing its job, my body is doing its job, and so it's a little bit of a slow process. It's been a long week. Last week was a very long week. Well, last week for you guys, currently this week for me, because I feel good enough today to be recording this, and just because I really want it done. But I think I'm good. So, long story about why this video is a little bit late and why you might see this throughout the video. Yeah, I did quite a bit of reading in April, not so much in May. It goes up and down, of course, but I'm pretty happy with the stack of books that I have to my left. I've had a great reading year so far. The last 2 months have been no different, and I'm really excited about that. I've read some really great books and I want to talk about them. So without any further ado, let's just get right into the video. This is a bit difficult with just one hand that really functions. I can't really, with my hand being tied to remain straight, I can't really put a lot of weight in that hand, so I should have done this backwards. Okay, anyway. The first book I read in April was the second Hunger Games book. If you watched my first wrap-up of this year, you know that I started my Hunger Games reread in the very end of March with the Hunger Games. I wanted to reread this original trilogy ahead of getting to the 2 prequels. I hadn't read the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes yet, and I wanted to get to Sunrise on the Reaping as soon as possible because it was getting hard to avoid spoilers. Although, we all know how the general story went, but still, you could be spoiled. I had been really intrigued by Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but I was scared that I wasn't going to really love it, and also I felt like I needed to reread the Hunger Games before I read that anyway, and I didn't want to reread the Hunger Games when that book came out, just because I was scared that I wasn't going to like it anymore. I was putting it off. Now I didn't feel like I had a choice anymore, and so I went on to Catching Fire. I mean, I can also mention at some point, I didn't read them right after each other, but I did also read Mockingjay, of course, in April. So I read the second and third book in the Hunger Games trilogy, the original trilogy, in April. Not right after each other. I did read a book in between, but I feel like I can talk about them together anyway. Most people by now know the Hunger Games either from the books or the movies, but I still want to be a little bit careful with how much I say. Most of what I had to say about the Hunger Games when I talked about that one in my last wrap-up, I have to say about these two. Still really well written books that have so much depth to them, and I feel like these are the kinds of books you can analyze to pieces and constantly find new elements that you find interesting or that you may not have picked up on the first time or the last time you read them. I do think actually that the first book is my favorite personal favorite of the 3 books in the original trilogy, but I think I gave that one 4.75 stars, and I think both of these 4.5 stars. I mean, altogether still an absolutely fantastic trilogy that I'm so glad that I reread. You can see where the author found her inspiration and how she found her inspiration in the way our world currently looks for this dystopian story that she had to tell, and it's done so well. Usually I'm not a big fan of first person, but for this story I actually feel like first person served this story really, really well. And it only took a couple of chapters or a few chapters in the first book for me to fall into the way the story was told, and also to realize why it was told that way and why it was the right decision. I'm really glad that I finally reread The Hunger Games. Really glad and really relieved that I still really enjoy them, if not more now than last time, which was when I was in my mid-teens. Well over a decade ago at this point. They stand the test of time, even though they're not that old. They're still really, really good books. I just have so much praise for these books. You'll find tons of analysis on YouTube if you're interested that have so many great points to make. I just want to, get through my wrap up, but I could talk about them forever. And I really kind of wish that we'd read them in school, because there's a lot to dissect and talk about in these books that I think a lot of people would find really interesting. So yeah, I completed my The Hunger Games trilogy reread in April. I read one book between Catching Fire and Mockingjay. I read The Women by Kristin Hannah. My first Kristin Hannah book. I've been eyeing this author for years because I'm a big historical fiction fan. I really enjoy historical fiction stories, and I know that a lot of people who enjoy historical fiction really enjoy Kristin Hannah's work. So I was really looking forward to trying out one of her books. A little bit nervous that I wouldn't like it as much as a lot of other people do, but rest assured, I did really, really enjoy this book. This was intense stuff. The Women, a story about the women who were involved in the Vietnam War. They're nurses. As far as I know, that's all of the women who were involved were nurses, and their role and their contribution in the Vietnam War was for a very long time overlooked, ignored, not counted. And it's shown in this book that these women who were there came home with scars too and trauma too, and they had no one to help them because no one really counted them. And there was already stigma around the veterans from Vietnam. I can't say I knew all that much about the Vietnam War to begin with, and I don't think I've read any books that are set in the Vietnam War. I think I've seen a few documentaries and movies, but the last one was a while ago, so I have like a vague idea of how long it lasted and what happened and how it went down and the reasons for it and all of that stuff. But this was a bit of an intense dive into that war and the experience that the people who fought in it would have been left with. It was really wonderfully told, really sad, really powerful. This was my first meeting with Kristin Hannah, won't be my last. I've already picked up The Nightingale by the same author, which is probably her most popular book. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been on my want to read list for a very long time. I've never gotten around to it. I hope to get to it this year, but we'll see. Probably not until the autumn or winter. But all in all, I can tell you that I'm a huge fan already. This was a really great first impression of Kristin Hannah. And yeah, I'm excited to get to more of her books. The entire point of rereading The Hunger Games was to get to the 2 prequels, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and Sunrise on the Reaping. But after reading Catching Fire, The Women, and then Mockingjay, I needed a break. I needed a break. I just needed to step away from tragedy for a second. And so I decided to pick up a book that I kind of just... okay, you know what? It's Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney. This is a nonfiction book where Rebecca Romney, the author, who is also a rare books dealer, she wrote this book because she discovered that a lot of the female authors that there's evidence of Jane Austen having been a fan of, having appreciated, having read and enjoyed, they've kind of been forgotten. They've kind of fallen out of the canon, as she talks about multiple times. She read a lot of male authors who were huge at the time, and for good reason, but she also read a lot of female authors, and those authors have not kind of been held onto in the canon as strongly. And so Rebecca Romney's mission was to kind of explore why. Why do we not read these female authors anymore if we read the male authors? Why do we assume that Jane Austen was the only great author of her time, of her era? Could there not have been some before and some during, some that she enjoyed herself? And so it was a really interesting premise. I haven't read any Jane Austen books yet. Those of you who have been around for a while, since last year, will know that I am scared of reading Jane Austen. It's intimidating because I feel like I'll struggle with the language a lot more than I would a modern English book. But I am planning on doing it this year. I said that last year too. Didn't happen because I fell into a slump. But I plan on reading Jane Austen this year for the first time. I want to read Pride and Prejudice for sure. A couple more probably. So yeah, I haven't read any Jane Austen. And yet this book really intrigued me. Even though I've never read any Jane Austen, I can appreciate that she is a literary icon that has absolutely stood the test of time and that is still incredibly well loved these days, with a huge fan base that has been existent for decades, if not centuries. And so I picked it up. I've fallen into the area where I'm reading about the author, not books from the author, because I'm scared of reading the books from the author, which is actually a problem that Rebecca Romney herself has a couple of times in this book when she's diving into these. I think there are eight female authors that she does a deep dive into their lives, their background, their writing. She tries reading something from all of them, I believe, and then just kind of tries to find out why they've disappeared from the canon. Why are these books not as big as Jane Austen's or any of the male writers that are still huge from that time era? Where have they gone? I found it really, really interesting, really illuminating. I myself wanted to look up, and did look up, a bunch of these authors and their books, and have put some of them on my TBR. It's never ending, and I probably will get to them in a very long time, but I'm going to get to them. And it's really, really pushed me to start reading my Jane Austen. I'm still scared, but I'm going to do it. For those of you who are a fan of Jane Austen, I highly recommend this book. For those of you who are interested in diving into some authors from the 17th and 1800s that you may not have heard of, but that were huge in their time and should still be talked about, this is something for you. I really liked this book. Not only did it bring a bunch of new authors that I found interesting to my attention, but it also gave us a look into the rare books trade that I was not really expecting, even though I knew that she was a rare books dealer from the blurb. I didn't realize how much of it we were going to learn about. I didn't realize that her job as a rare books dealer would play such a role as it did in this book. The only thing I didn't love was that, as with most nonfiction, it doesn't have to be read like front to back. You can jump in and out. You can choose a chapter here, choose a chapter there, and read it at your leisure. It's not the same as like a fiction novel that you have to read start to finish to understand. It's basically structured as an introduction, and then each of the authors that she's exploring gets a chapter, and then there's a conclusion. And so it's kind of like, if you don't feel like reading all of the authors in the same order, you don't have to, I guess. You could read them however you'd like. So I get why. I feel like there's parts of it that get repetitive. Some things have to be repeated in each of the chapters. I read it from start to finish. I read it like a novel. And so to me, there are some things that when I read it start to finish in the space of like a week and a half, eventually got a little repetitive that she'd already said. I understand why it's written the way that it is. Other than that, I found this incredible. I really, really loved this book. This is a 2025 release. I think it came out in February, and my local bookstore randomly had it, and so I picked it up, mostly because it's beautiful and I want to display it on my shelf one day, but also I'm really glad that I've read it and really enjoyed it. So yeah, highly recommend. I didn't feel like I was fully ready to jump back into the world of the Hunger Games after reading the Jane Austen bookshelf, which was a great palate cleanser. It was non-fiction, it was about literary icon and all of her inspirations centuries ago, so it was a great palate cleanser. But I wasn't quite ready to jump back into the Hunger Games. And so I decided instead to pick up The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. This is, was this her very first novel? And I really, really loved it. I really liked it. This is one of my favorite Agatha Christie stories, I think. I like this more than I like the movie, in fact. It has been a very long time since I watched the adaptation for this one, and so I can't really remember it all that well, but I do know that I liked the book more. I loved hearing from Hastings' perspective. I really liked the storyline. I remembered only bits and pieces from the movie, and so I doubted myself throughout most of this whether I knew who the actual murderer was, and if I'd gotten it wrong. I really had a great time reading this one. It's, again, not that long. Most of her books are pretty short. Agatha Christie books are also very, very good as palate cleansers. Then I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, like 5 years late, but I'm here. I read this book and I watched the movie before I got to Sunrise on the Reaping. I did both of those things. And this book was so good. It is probably my favorite book of all of the Hunger Games world books. I don't even know what to say, where to start. I don't even know what to say. I'm kind of speechless just thinking about it. It's so good. I think I said somewhere that this is by no means the origin story of a villain. That's not this book at all. It is, however, a look into the mind of someone who is self-serving, selfish, opportunistic, manipulative, and just cruel. It's the kind of story where you sit in the head of a villain, right? You sit in the head of someone who you don't like, in fact, who you loathe. And you know, in this case, you know how this person turns out. You know where the story is going. And you kind of want to hope that there is some goodness in him. And every time it might feel like there is, he reveals his motivations, or like you pick up on the motivations and you realize that every single motivation is self-serving. Every single motivation is for his own sake. It's him at the center of his world, and nothing else really matters as much. And I think the most interesting part was seeing the justifications and the way that this main character, the mental gymnastics they go through to justify their actions, and how they see themselves as being in the right, and the way that they kind of justify those things and the stretches they make. It's fascinating and heartbreaking and awful. And this book just did it so well. You can tell that there was something different with this book the minute you open it and realize it's not first person, and there must be a reason for it. And the choice to actually write this book and kind of give us a look into Snow's character when it was still kind of establishing itself and forming itself, because he was 18 here, quite young. And obviously the argument of nature versus nurture, and if there hadn't been a war, what would he be like? Could he have ever been saved? Lots of these questions that I find so fascinating. You get to thinking about these questions with this book. Human nature is so interesting. I guess the most significant part of this book is that it kind of humanizes Snow, and not in a like, oh, now I have sympathy for him, but it makes you realize that even though he became this tyrant, this awful, awful person, even though this is who he is also a human. And he thinks, and he calculates, and he makes these decisions. He's analyzed, these are the possible consequences, and I'm going to do it anyway. And it kind of just makes him even more of a villain. This is a masterclass in writing. There is no doubt in my mind as I read this whole thing, I know that he's a villain. I know that he's a bad guy. I know what he becomes, and I can read on the pages and see what he is. If he's always been this calculating and this opportunistic, then there's no wonder to me at all how he became the person that he became. It was just done so well. This book was written so well. I don't know when she started writing this book, but if it took her 7 years to write this book, I would understand, because wow, it is done so well. I don't even know how to talk about this book. I just feel like I'm bursting with the need to, and at the same time not knowing how to. I've watched a lot of analyses and discussions on this book because I can't get enough of it. If you've read this book, or if you've only seen the movie, please either read the book or watch someone discuss the book itself. This was a very difficult story to actually adapt anyway, and I feel like they probably did their best, but watching only the movie gives you a very, very different view and opinion of Snow. You'll see Snow differently if you also read the book, or at least listen to someone discussing the book. You might hear some differences and some ways that things were in the book that were hard to either depict in the movie or that the movie changed. This was just such a good book, and I can't get the words out. They feel like they're stuck in the bottom of my throat, the base of my throat, and I can't get them out. And I just want to, like, I'm bursting, and I don't have the words to describe, but I loved this book. This was such a great book. I gave this one 4.75, just like I gave the first Hunger Games book. They're my favorites. They're so good. So good. And I highly recommend them. After Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I read Sunrise on the Reaping. I don't have my physical copy here. I have the dust jacket though. Sunrise on the Reaping, and all I have to say is, oh Haymitch. Oh Haymitch. Oh Haymitch. Oh Haymitch. Oh Haymitch. And if there was any doubt that Snow is an awful, awful human being, I give you Sunrise on the Reaping. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was a perfect addition to the Hunger Games world, the Hunger Games books. Sunrise on the Reaping also feels like a really good addition. I really like that we got to see what little we already knew about Haymitch's Hunger Games and how the Hunger Games actually played out. Propaganda was obviously a major theme in this book, and the message is really hammered in. Like, there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever. Suzanne Collins is very obvious about what it is she wants this book to say. I know readers have said that it was very much, obviously there was a lot of showing, but there was also a lot of telling, and a lot of people have said that that was highly necessary because a lot of the messages in the Hunger Games seem to be going over a lot of people's heads, and I guess she wanted to add a book that really just drove the nail in that there is no room for doubt here. This is exactly what I want to say. I'm saying it plain. Here it is. Here you have my message. I registered that she was saying a lot. She was showing, but she was also telling a lot more than she did in her other books. And you know what? I don't mind, because she writes so well that I didn't mind. Suzanne Collins is a great writer. I loved getting Haymitch's story. I loved Haymitch in the books. I always felt Katniss was a little bit too tough on him. But of course, she was a child and hadn't been through everything that he'd been through yet. And she passed judgment a little too soon. And I think she realized over time exactly why he was the way that he was. And it can annoy you anyway. But I think she understood a lot more. So I'm really glad to have Haymitch's story. I really appreciate that addition to the Hunger Games verse. And I really did enjoy that one too. I have a strong favorite in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and the first Hunger Games book, but all of the other books are pretty much evenly ranked. It's a fantastic series. 5 incredibly good books. Highly recommend them to absolutely everyone. Again, after 2 pretty intense Hunger Games verse books, finally having read the prequels and enjoying them so much, but they're intense, they're tough, and they exhausted me mentally, so I needed a break, and I decided to pick up the Dallergut Dream Department Store, which has been on my shelf not all that long, but it was colorful and short and felt like a feel-good story, and so I decided to just give myself a little break with this one. I don't know why I didn't love it, but I did really like it. I was a little confused in the beginning, didn't really understand how any of this worked, but pieces fell into place throughout the book and it was very satisfying. It was a little bit dull in the beginning, just because it's the very beginning of the story and it's setting a lot of things up, but I loved the concept. I feel like a lot of these kinds of books, they touch a lot on the surface and they kind of take small dips into the deep end, but it feels a lot like we're scratching the surface. I don't really mind. I don't need to dive deep into a lot of this stuff. I would have really liked it if we did, but I don't mind so much that we didn't. I still had a good time with it. Again, the concept was just amazing. I really, really liked this concept. I know there's a second book out, and I'm really considering reading it. It was a nice book to read after reading those 2 Hunger Games books. It gave me a warm, cozy feeling, and I feel like I want to reread this one come autumn. But yeah, I did really enjoy this one. Then I read All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami. I've seen her books on the shelves in the bookstore for ages. I've been intrigued, but I've been a little bit hesitant, mostly because the reviews are so mixed for a lot of her books. This was the one that had the most consensus. Of all the people that read multiple of her books, this one seems to be generally the one that people like the best. And so I felt like it was a safe place to start. It's also not very big. I think it's 220 pages or something. And I remember having read the back of the book a while back, but when I picked this up kind of on a whim at a bookstore, I didn't reread the back. I just knew that I'd read the summary once and decided that this was the one I wanted to start with when I did read her books. And you know what? I actually quite enjoyed this one, and I don't really know why. I will say there was a dip somewhere in the middle of this book. I got a little bit bored, but then I got back into it. So not perfect. I really can't tell you why I thought this was as good as I thought it was. I think the writing has a lot to say. When I say that I really like the book and I don't really know why, it's probably the writing that was the biggest plus. Yeah, I did really like the writing. It's also a kind of book that, although it hasn't been that long since I finished it, I still think about it. Again, I don't really know why. I generally don't really know why I liked this one as much as I did. I can't put my finger on it, but I like this one, and I'm actually really interested in getting into more of her books now, and I'm not really sure where I want to start, but I know that I want to try. But as to why I like it, couldn't tell you really. I just did. I guess maybe I was in the mood for it, because this is the kind of book that I feel like if I weren't in the mood for it, I would not have vibed with it. So I'm glad that I was in the mood for it when I picked it up. This is what I do. I pick things up on a whim, and that's usually because this is what I happen to be in the mood for subconsciously, I know. And at least this time I ended up really enjoying it. I felt like the ending was a little bit abrupt. But it felt like it was in line with the rest of like this story for some reason. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm going to rate it or how I rated it. But all I know is that I liked this. And I can't tell you why. I don't know. But I did. The last thing that I read in May was a really short story. I don't really know if I want to count it because it was like, I think Goodreads logged it at like 11 pages, so it's not long. It's Jonathan Nolan's Memento Mori, which, yes, it's that Nolan. It's Christopher Nolan's brother. Memento Mori, it's Latin. I don't remember what it is that it stands for. I'll put it on the screen or in the description or something. Apparently, if I understood it right, they came up with this idea of someone who loses their short-term memory, so they can never remember anything that just happens to them. They can remember everything before their accident that caused the memory loss, but they're not able to create new memories, and so they kind of try and start keeping track with notes and tattoos and that kind of stuff to try and manage their situation. And so Jonathan Nolan wrote a short story. I think it was for Esquire. I'll link the story below if I can find it again. And then Christopher Nolan directed a movie called Memento. I watched the Memento movie, and that's when I realized, or I googled the movie. Obviously I always Google movies when I watch them, and I realized, or it said, that this was kind of based on a story written by his brother, Jonathan Nolan, based on a discussion they'd had, or like a common idea that they'd had about this kind of situation. So I watched the Memento movie, and then I read Memento Mori that evening. It took me 20 minutes, I guess, reading that article, or the short story in the magazine. And it was really interesting. A little hard to follow. Obviously, I don't think that can be helped. But they're very different. The Memento Mori short story is very different from Memento. They're based on the same concept, but the way that the stories are told are obviously very different. One is an 11-page short story and one is a full-on movie. So they kind of both took the idea and each did their own twist on it. And I really liked seeing the two next to each other. I liked seeing the two different takes on the same kind of idea. And I really liked the way both were done. I don't know if I like one more than the other, but I'm really glad that I did read the short story. It was good. I have to look into if Jonathan Nolan has written more short stories, because I really liked that one. But yeah, it was interesting. Very interesting. And I'm glad that I watched the movie, and I'm glad that I read the short story too. If you're gonna do one, you should do the other two. I feel like they kind of have to go hand in hand. So those are the, I only have one hand. These are the, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 10. 10. So if you count that short story, those are the 10. Those are the 10 books that I read in April and May. I only have one hand, so I can't hold all of the books up to show you, but there's these ones, there's these ones, there's these ones, and then there's Sunrise on the Reaping, which I don't have my physical copy with me right now, and also Memento Mori, which does not have a physical copy as far as I'm aware. Oh, I can't do it. I can't do it. Ow. Okay. Maybe if I... Okay. Ta-da! All in all, I've had a great reading year so far. We are 5 months in, we're in June now. I haven't read anything in June so far, mostly because I've been miserable with my wrist and it's been hard to do anything at all. So I haven't read anything in June yet, but I'm going to have a very hard time come the end of June, beginning of July when I do the half-year wrap-up thing. I'm gonna have a very hard time picking favorites and least favorites. I've just read so many good books so far this year. I'm so happy with my reading so far this year. There's been a little bit of a mix. I don't think I've been reading too much of anything. Maybe I need a little bit of break from dystopian novels right this second, but it's been 5 months and we still have 7 months left of reading to go. And I'm really excited to see what I end up reading in the next months and how I can balance things out even more. I'm excited. There are a lot of unread books on my shelves now, and I'm just really looking forward to getting some more from the unread to the read shelves. But that's it from me this time around. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any thoughts or opinions on any of the books that I've mentioned in this video, any of the books that I read in April and May, then please do feel free to share them in the comments, whether you really enjoyed them or whether they weren't really for you. Let me know what you guys have been reading and what you've been enjoying recently. I'm always looking for more recommendations, even though I definitely don't need them. Just looking at my bookshelf and all of the unread books that I have, definitely don't need more books on these shelves. But I mean, don't I though? Don't I? So I'll see you in the comments. Let's just talk all of the books. I really appreciate that you all clicked in on this video just to see what little old me is reading. I will say I'm happy that I'm finished with my Hunger Games reread, because although I need to get better at allowing myself to reread books, again, I have a lot of unread books and I want to get to some of them. So now I don't think I'm going to reread more books this summer. I do feel like I want to reread a book or two come the autumn or the winter, but we'll see when we get there. But that's it for me. I hope you've had a really great day. I hope you have a really lovely week. I hope the book you're reading is a really good one, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!